We're here. We made it. This has been a labor of love for me. I'm not going to lie. This has been a lot of really hard work. And I bet it's been a lot of really hard work for you, hopefully, very illuminating. Hopefully, we've challenged you and you've challenged yourself to try new things, to stretch yourself, to peel back those layers and figure out how you want to grow and rise as a better self leader and as a better leader for your organization, for your families, for your communities. And so here we are. We started kind of zoomed out, right? In our overview, we wanted to zoom out and say, okay, how do these things kind of work together? And then we zoomed in to each element of self leadership and looked at them in detail. Now we're going to zoom out again with a little bit of a different lens because you're seeing it from the perspective of now understanding all of it, understanding how it integrates into your life, how you have put it into practice, and the kind of change that it can make. So most of these slides are the same that they were the first week, but how we will be viewing them and talking about them will be different because we're coming from a place of knowing, I guess, right? Like a place of understanding. Oh, okay, this is how it all works together in practice. So I'm really excited. Let's go. So our learning objectives are the same. We're going to review what self-leadership is and what it's not because it's been a while. We're going to talk about what it looks like in practice when you are or you're not practicing self-leadership. And we're going to talk about why that matters. And it's again, we're going to zoom out and take more of a global look at it so you can see it from every angle. And then, how can you continue to integrate it starting now and hopefully in the team leadership course which comes next, which I think that you'll really love because it's all about taking this new you that you're developing, that you will continue to develop, and figuring out how to uh, put it into more practical use in your relationships with others. So, you may recall that a common definition of leadership is telling other people what to do and getting them to do it. I think we could all agree that that is not really what leadership is about. Um, that's a great dictator, right? But leadership is a little bit different, especially when you're talking about self leadership, which is about you because you lead as yourself. So self leadership is you striving to achieve a whole and balanced self so that that whole and balanced self can be brought to all relationships, including professional relationships, and inspire other people to become their whole and balanced self and bring those people to the relationships. And that's a pretty awesome organization with a pretty great culture. And you may remember this video and the idea that relationships are like tennis games, including professional relationships. You volley back and forth, you start to predict behavior. And sometimes when you predict behavior, you get more of that behavior because you go looking for that behavior. So it's a reinforcing thing, right? And you may then start to react without thinking, and then you definitely get more of the same. And then you start to, if it's a really kind of tense situation, you may start to try to make up a story in your head that explains why they're behaving the way that they are, that typically reinforces your expectation or belief that you had about that person. So most people think about a relationship as they mostly think about the other person and how that other person is showing up in a relationship. But with self leadership, we acknowledge that we cannot accurately control or predict another person's behavior. You can only control how you respond to that person, how you send the ball back. And that's why self leadership is so important because if you want to lead others, you have to lead yourself first. You have to have the ability to know your triggers and know when to pause, be able to pause, to think, calculate, and then send a ball back. And when we get to team leadership, it's going to be about sending the ball back in a way that will benefit them, right? Because really when we have a relationship, we're not adversaries. So that's where the limitation of the tennis game happens. But when you're working with them as a team, you want to send them ball in a way that benefits them so they can send you back something really positive, and then you start to change the relationship. And when everybody starts to change those relationships in an organization, that's how you have a positive culture change. Super cool. I love it. Here's the examples that we used last time, right? we often see the leader who says, "Do it my way. I'm never wrong, and I'm better than you." And even if they don't come out and say those things, they give that impression. And sometimes we give that impression when we are maybe feeling insecure, or we're working with someone who we just don't really like, and they trigger us in the wrong way. And so self leadership gives us the skills to step out of these old roles, this old rhetoric, and show up in a different way that says, "Hey, how would you do it better?" Hey, you know what? I take personal responsibility. I didn't do my best here. And no, I may have a higher title than you, but we both have value as people. And I want to understand your personal values so I can respect them. It's a much different way to lead. And it all comes down to social safety or psychological safety. And Google Project Aristotle found that this was the number one predictor of team success. So if you want to have a successful team and a successful organization, then you want to feel psychologically safe and make sure everyone else on your team is feeling psychologically safe. And just by demonstrating it yourself, you will help others. But then the team leadership is about how to be very you know, uh, I guess, intentional about it, and how to put it into practice to help other people feel that sense of psychological safety. It's going to be really fun. I can't wait. Okay, so let's review the 5 elements of self leadership, which you are pretty familiar with by now, but it's helpful to see them in one area. So we have self acceptance, self awareness, self governance, self compassion, and self validation. And I just want you to pause for a second. Don't actually pause the screen. I'm going to give you a second to pause and think about what you thought like 6 weeks ago when you first saw this slide. What did you think in comparison to what you think now? And think back to these areas of self leadership and which ones challenge you the most, which ones were you like, I got this. But you still could hopefully grow and got it even more. That's not proper English. Moving on. But take a second to think about those, and then let's talk about self acceptance. So I know that self acceptance is truly just the strangest, weirdest way to start a leadership institute. But I hope you came to a point where you really saw a lot of value in it. Because when you're out of balance in self acceptance, you feel resistance and waste a lot of energy resisting your current reality. You may be completely obsessed with impressions, or very concerned about how you're coming across to others and trying to control their opinions of you. You may be problem focused or feel resentment about the environment in which you're working or living. But when self acceptance is in balance, you have a yes and attitude, meaning that you take whatever is given, you take whatever deck of cards or hand is given to you, and you play the best you can with it. You feel authentic, like you can be authentic, like you don't have to be perfect to be okay. And you feel a sense of being able to focus on solutions, right? Because it's like, okay, well, the problem is what the problem is. Now what? And that gives you a sense of peace and gratitude. It helps you focus more on the positives than on the negatives. And really, the takeaway here was that self acceptance is the first step in growth. It is your baseline, it's your starting point. It's your, all right, this is the situation, now let's go. Now, self awareness, again, we did self awareness after self acceptance because we don't want to be judgy when we become self aware. It's really easy for that to happen because we may notice that sometimes we are a difficult personality. We are challenging to get along with. We may notice that we get stuck because we're not aware of why we're making the same mistakes over and over again. We may have a tendency to blame others because it's challenging for us to, it doesn't feel safe to acknowledge our contribution to a problem or a failing. And it's very difficult to stay present. You're kind of always in the past or the future. Whereas when self awareness is in balance, you're easy to get along with because you understand and respect the perceptions and values of others and recognize that your own aren't the only sole truth. You're growth focused because you start to be aware of, oh, okay, well, here's where I could do better. Here's where I'm getting in my own way. And you become interested and excited to get around it. And you take personal responsibility because it's okay and safe to do so. You're not a perfect human being, and you don't expect that from yourself or others. And it's much easier to be present. You're not constantly thinking about the past and reminiscing about it. You're not constantly worrying about the future or dreaming about the future. You're here and now. And the big takeaway for self-awareness was that it provides clarity when it's objective and non-judgmental. It provides clarity, inspiration, and presence for yourself and those around you. So the next we talked about self-governance. And I know self-governance was the most actionable of all of our modules where you started to say, okay, how am I actually acting in my corporation or in my organization or in my home or in my community, wherever that is? And is it too extreme? Is it out of balance or is it in balance? So if it's out of balance, you may be too controlling and obsessive, micromanaging, or on the other side of the spectrum, way too disorganized and chaotic. You may completely lack boundaries or have way too rigid of boundaries, or you may lack a sense of self care because you're not taking time to refuel. You're always in one of the extremes. When it's in balance, you're flexible and adaptive while maintaining a routine structure. In other words, you have a routine that you kind of don't have to think about, so you can go on autopilot if you need to, which I know is not the same thing as being present, like we talked about a couple of minutes ago. But you do need times where you can just brush your teeth, right? And you don't have to put it on your to-do list. That's more what it's about. It's about having things that are automatic that you don't have to put on your to-do list. But when things pop up, you can be flexible and adaptive, and you don't let just anything pull you out of your routine. You kind of know what can pull you out of your routine and what can't because you have reasonable boundaries. You set gentle and reasonable boundaries, you enforce them, but you also know what is okay to break them. And you prioritize self care because you know you have to refuel. And the takeaway here was that self governance facilitates balance. It helps you have a balance of work and life. It also helps you have balance so you're not kind of all go and no quit, or so you don't work really hard and then burn out, which I see quite a bit. It helps you approach goals in a more sustainable way. It's that whole micro, bare minimum approach that I like to call it. And then self compassion is for when self governance maybe didn't go so well. Okay. And that's when you're like, oh, but I should have been able to do it. I should have known better, or I should never have done that. Or you're very risk averse because failures hurt a lot and you don't know how to deal with that. You may have a strong inner jerk, that very kind of demeaning parent, and you may feel unmotivated and withdrawn because you just don't know why, but you don't feel up to these mammoth tasks and these mammoth undertakings that you're expecting of yourself. But when self compassion is in balance, you feel curious to try new things because it's okay if it doesn't work out. You're kind to yourself anyway, which allows you to be resilient. So when things don't work out, you're kind to yourself anyway, and then just bounce back and try something else or try it again. And in order to do that, you have an inner cheerleader who is encouraging and loving and reminds you to get back up and get back into the game, reminds you of your strengths. You're fast, run faster, you could do this. And that helps you stay really motivated. So, self compassion, you may remember, is my favorite module. It's been an incredible tool in my life, and I hope you have been using it in yours. And the big takeaway is that self-compassion develops resiliency, which you need in business and you need in any organization because not everything you try will work out and there will be hard days. And then last, we have self validation. Now, we just talked about this last week, so I'm not going to go in too much detail, but I will remind you that when it's out of balance, you're overcompensating by being a know it all. You may have imposter syndrome, so you don't feel that strong internal sense of self confidence. You're like always wondering who's going to find out that you don't really know what you're talking about. You compare yourself to others and you use others as a metric of whether or not you have value. And so you need a lot of external affirmation from others, encouragement and coaxing and hand holding. Where when you are in balance with self validation, you show up as a learner. You're enthusiastic to try new things and be uncomfortable. You are self confident, this innate sense of self confidence that nobody can shake, that wildflower who grows regardless of the fact that other people call it a weed. You value uniqueness, even which encompasses flaws. You embrace those flaws, and so you can affirm yourself. You know when you shine, You acknowledge it when you shine, and you don't need other people to do it for you. Although, let's face it, that's always nice. Call me and tell me you love this program. Okay, so so in summary, self-validation incites confidence. It helps you be a truly authentic, confident individual from the inside out. And I hope you're already starting to feel that after last week's module. So, as a self leader, the self talk sounds like I can only control me. Okay. And I take ownership and responsibility for the me that I bring to work. So, let's go back to this kind of like a overview. All right. Would you rather work for a leader who focuses on problems, is a difficult personality, is controlling and obsessive, is risk averse, a know it all, a blamer? Or would you rather work for someone who focuses on solutions, is easy and fun to get along with, who's flexible and adaptive, but still routines and structured, who is resilient, who is a learner and embraces trying new things and growing and being uncomfortable, and takes personal responsibility when things don't go well? I think we know the answer to that. So let's review. This is a review of today and kind of all of this. So you ready for our last review for self leadership? So we have self acceptance, self awareness, self governance, self compassion, and self validation. And hopefully now you're starting to see that they do overlap a little bit. They're connected a little bit. You may have noticed that there was an attribute that was in one that was also in another, and that's okay. They're cut from the same cloth. If they were completely different, they wouldn't go together, right? And different ones shine a light on others, on some attributes more than others, and that's the reason why you saw some overlap there. But leadership is not just telling other people what to do and getting them to do it. It's about being a whole person, being someone who people want to follow, being someone who inspires them to self lead. And when you're self leading and everyone's self leading, that is a pretty awesome organization. And again, self talk is I can only control me, right? And I'm going to bring the best me here that I possibly can every day. So I hope we met all of the learning objectives for today, for the entire program. You know, I hope you understand what leadership is, self leadership is, and what it isn't in detail. Know how to practice it and recognize when it's not in balance or when it is. I hope you understand why it matters for leadership overall. And I hope you have been integrating it and will continue to integrate it. So now the next lesson is going to be a reassessment. You're going to take the exact same assessment that you took in the very first module again. So you can track areas where you've improved, areas where you still want to improve, and compare your score from last time to this time. We want to know that this program has been successful for you in some way. And in any way, if there's been success, that success. I'm really excited for you to retake the assessment, and I hope that you feel, even regardless of those metrics, feel like you have changed and you are a more confident, aware, compassionate self leader. So now we have this certificate of completion. If you want a personalized certificate of completion, please reach out to us. Not everybody cares about that stuff, but if you do and you want a certificate of completion that's personalized with your name on it, that you can hang on the wall or file in your filing cabinet, or I don't know, burn, whatever you want to do, hopefully not that, then you reach out to us at at admin at hodgescoaching.com, and we will take care of that for you and send you one directly via email that you can print out. Yay, you did it! And please go to your LinkedIn group. Now you are going to be a leader and example for all of these elements of self leadership. And then you're going to get to be able to go start team leadership and learn from the people who have already done those modules as well. So please help others who have questions, who are taking their first baby steps, and then learn from the others who are, who've taken more steps than you have so far. All right, so next week we're going to do the team leadership overview. Now, the five elements of team leadership are empathy, gratitude, consent, clarity, and boundaries. And you've seen these a few times as we've talked about how each module affects the rest of the modules in the Leadership Institute. So, I know you've seen these words before a few times, but next week we're going to get into what it looks like when they're in balance versus out of balance, just like we did for the self leadership overview. And then you'll be able to take an assessment for how you're showing up in these areas. All right. So, in conclusion, the takeaway summary: you lead others as yourself. Who you are is how you lead. So focus on that self leadership piece and continue to grow who you are and help you become a more whole, complete person that is, excited, engaging, healthy, aware, compassionate, and confident every day. It was a true pleasure. I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you next week for team leadership.